All right, so we're going to talk about this four-part documentary that everybody should watch called Century of the Self. I mean, how can you not watch it with a title like that?
Don't let the British voice fool you. It's not really a historical documentary. They're really personal essays about Freud's influence on the 20th century.
Left-wing celebrities who in 2009, yeah, they could use gay as a pejorative in a tweet. And it was, at that time it was funny. 11 years later, it was a cancelable offense. Mm-hmm. And now we're, back, I guess. Oh, we passed peak woke. We can say retard again. How do you know that in 2032, when the wokes come back, they dig up a tweet from 2026 where you used retard as an ableist slur, and now you're going to lose your TV writing job or your
whatever, AI prompting job.
Yeah, exactly.
My sense is the most important question really is what does lead to fulfillment for people actually? I think there probably is a lot of suffering just baked into being a person that you can't ever get rid of. It just seems like a question that's so central, but that we haven't really made good progress on.
All right, we're back. This is the Open Therapy podcast. I'm with Andrew Hartz and Rob Henderson, Dr. Andrew Hartz, Dr. Rob Henderson. I am Dr. Jill Biden, otherwise known as Megan Dom. Hello. How are you guys doing? Are you okay? Yeah. We got a lot to discuss. I had a weird it's so strange the way these things are. As I think my house burned down about a year and a half ago, and the fire's out here. And then this morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. and it smelled like smoke. It was just really smoky out, and it turned out there's a warehouse fire, and the fairly not too close, but the wind was just blowing this direction. But it's amazing how visceral that is. I just had to get up, and been up since 4. It's these things are so triggering, especially a smell. Is that funny?
Have there been any warnings? Are there warnings about sort of air quality and that kind of thing?
Oh, air quality. Outside? Yeah, but this is Los Angeles, so there's always air quality problem. But no, I have okay. This app. So everybody now has this thing that's called Watch Duty. It's an app that tells you where wildfires are in various places, and it has this particular sound that the notification makes, and that is what's really startling, because everybody downloaded this app during the fires, because the fires were taking place over several days, and so it was just constantly going off at that time, this notification sound. And so whenever you hear it, it's really triggering. But it's just so funny because everybody in LA has this app, so you'll hear the sound, if you're at a restaurant or something, and it can tell you about a fire that's 50 miles away. But better safe than sorry. What a world.
I mean, you'd expect it to maybe you get desensitized over time, but I don't know.
The smells are, so evocative, and sounds. Yeah. So anyway, I've been up. All right. So we're going to talk about this 4-part documentary that everybody should watch called Century of the Self. I mean, how can you not watch it with a title like that? And so, Andrew, you're the one who suggested it. So do you want to tell us why you did?
Yeah, this is a 4-part series. They're video essays. Don't let the British voice fool you. It's not really a historical documentary. They're really personal essays that are kind of musing about Freud's influence on the 20th century and the influence of psychoanalysis on the 20th century. So they do hit on history, but it's a very opinionated take on that history. And I guess they kind of go through it pretty chronologically. The first part is 1900 to 1925-ish, and then the second part is the next step, or maybe the first part goes to World War II, and then it's goes to the 60s, and then there's this into the 80s, and then there's a fourth part that concludes. And I think it came out in the early 2000s, so it was
right.
Very much made sense at the time. but you get a sense of like themes about how people are thinking about psychology and fulfillment and emotion and identity, and the incredible cultural impact of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. Like I think people, it's like because it happens in private, people don't always see its incredible cultural power, which I think the documentary makes clear.
Right. And a big part of the series is the influence of Edward Bernays, who was Freud's nephew and is often called the inventor of PR, of public relations, right? And so it's about how he borrowed from psychological concepts as a way of influencing people. I mean, it has to do with influencing the masses and kind of, you know, how they took sort of principles of mind control that were used, you know, by the Nazis, for instance, and, you know, that bleeds into advertising and marketing and then political strategy.
I was told when I was in grad school, I don't know if you've heard this, Rob, that there's actually a fair amount of social psychology research or of psychology research that's owned by the private sector, that's owned by marketing firms, and it's not in the public, so we don't see it. But I encountered this because my dissertation had a lot to do with color and the influences of color on emotions and mood and stuff.
Oh.
And what I kept coming up against was people saying there's a lot of this that's done by marketing and advertising firms in-house, but they keep their findings private. So a lot of the color psychology research is actually done privately and not accessible to the public. It's clear that marketing firms and advertising firms are hugely influenced by psychology, including pretty like wild psychoanalytic ideas. Like I do see like psychoanalysis in advertising still, like even in 2026. I think a lot of those ideas are still active in marketing and advertising.
Can you think of any examples of that? I was struggling to come up with any sort of modern day, illustrations of psychoanalysis in modern advertising. I mean, there's now there's marketing psychology and behavioral economics, and I know a lot of the tech companies, they have a lot of data, internal data, proprietary data, information about their users. I've heard that companies like Procter and Gamble have a lot of very kind of insightful information about consumer behavior. But I'm surprised. Is psychoanalysis still used in advertising and marketing?
Yeah, I mean, well, you see it. I mean, I guess I don't know what's motivating them, but I guess like I don't know if this might not be a good example, but it's the one that's coming to my mind. Like there's like Lacan is a very influential like postmodern French psychoanalyst, and he's really preoccupied with this idea of signifiers. Really succinctly, these are kind of like words that have multiple meanings. So like, for example, if I might have a dream that I'm like behind a boat and I keep getting caught in the wake of the boat. Okay. And wake as a word has many different meanings. So there's waking up in the morning, there's the wake of a boat, there's also a funeral. So maybe somebody who just had a death is having this dream about the wake of a boat, and they're caught in the wake of the boat, and the wake signifies a wake. And that type of thing happens in dreams. It happens in therapy sessions. I had a client a while ago who had a colon cancer and was in a relationship, and he texted his wife, like, let's meet for lunch at 12. And it was 1200. And their partner was upset because they're like, you left out the two dots in the time. So there was no the two dots were missing. So they left the colon out of the time. And
God.
so the colon and the time signifies like the colon, like their colon and their feelings about. So there's this stuff happening.
No, I'm sorry. No, okay, keep going.
But like,
No, Megan's skeptical.
You're skeptical?
This is the kind of stuff that it's interesting to talk about, but I don't place any significance in this signifier.
I don't find it hard to believe that somebody who's super like concerned about their colon, then they manifest this slip with the colon and it doesn't mean anything. And especially like they got in this big fight about it. Like, why are they fighting about it? The idea that both of them have feelings about this colon. I don't know. I thought that was a pretty clear example. Not saying every little.
That's like, why don't people, it's like if you have your period, you are not putting a period on the end of a sentence or something.
But this is just private communication, right? This is like nothing to do with ads or marketing. I mean,
but I do see, I have an example from an ad.
Okay.
If you like a great, I think it's a great name for a dating app is Bumble. Because I think it is such a juicy signifier where it's like when you're lost in the middle of nowhere, people will say you're in Bumblefuck. And the idea of linking those two concepts, like the concept of being lost, being in the middle of nowhere, and fucking, and then there's like obviously there's the queen bee dynamic, there's the birds and the bees dynamic, there's the bumbling through it dynamic. It has so many meanings loaded into it that are largely operating unconsciously, but they make it really juicy for people. And you see advertisers find really juicy signifiers that they center in their branding.
That's interesting. Yeah, that there may be these chains of association that when you say the word Bumble or you download the app or you use it, you may not be consciously aware that it has these these associations, it's a signifier for these other things, but maybe it makes the app more attractive to use or more exciting or titillating in some way. I'm thinking about, I guess just sort of more modern, straightforward marketing psychology, like the famous example of renaming the Patagonian toothfish into Chilean sea bass. It's the same fish, but when restaurants attempted to charge $50 for a plate of Patagonian toothfish, people wouldn't order it. But when it was renamed Chilean sea bass, then it became a very popular item.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's just, that's like it's very easy to understand this, right? Because one of those sounds very ugly and unappetizing, and the other sounds kind of highfalutin and, a quality, kind of seafood. But, I don't think it would require Bernays or Freud to to grasp why we favor one versus the other. But the Bumble thing, there is something more, I guess, sort of psychoanalytic about that.
Yeah.
I don't think what percentage of people using the app are thinking about those associations consciously?
Very few, I would imagine.
So, but
those people should get together. The people who are thinking about those things consciously should be able to match with each other.
Yeah,
so
they should
nerd out.
But so I do think that there's ways that it, like when the advertising works, that it clicks on, those types of dynamics.
In the first episode of Century of this, so I'd heard about the Torches of Freedom thing, where tobacco companies wanted women to start smoking cigarettes, and they, had this whole sort of outdoor demonstration of, I guess like the flappers, the women of the 20s smoking cigarettes, calling them Torches of Freedom, kind of a liberating movement. Smoke your cigarette, you're free. It's kind of like being a man. But then in part one of Century of the Self, they also suggested the cigarette as symbolic of the penis. That, when women are smoking, they're acquiring this sort of phallic symbol, and, it's sort of, symbolically obtaining the masculine sexual organ, symbolizing freedom and strength and masculinity and so on. And, at first, my first impression was it sounds pretty ridiculous, but, there is, I guess, there was a connection. Smoking at that time was, I suppose it was seen as more masculine activity, and then sort of linked to, there's sort of a phallic symbolic attribute there. And I think it's hard for me, I guess, like separating, okay, like, do they really mean it's a substitute penis, or is it symbolically a substitute penis, or is it, I don't know, somehow both? How
also,
conscious
like,
is this
you
versus
have
unconscious?
The penis, or are you just having it in your mouth? That's like, who is that appealing to? It's,
and then
I don't
Freud's
know
famous
the owner
quote,
of
a
it.
cigar is just a cigar.
Right, but a cigarette is something else entirely, apparently. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
it is. I yeah, I have so many thoughts about this series. I mean, I don't want to skip ahead too far, but just the way that the way that individuality is sold as a value and as a sexy concept, and yet every single thing people flock to these to any kind of concept because it's a group. They want to belong. It's always this mass phenomenon. So they're actually selling uniqueness and individuality and being different, but it's like en masse. Like that's kind of there is this kind of like central existential kind of like mind explosion happening in the middle of this.
Yeah, people are being individual in particular ways that connect them to group.
Well, that this is what's attractive. I mean, they were talking about how, around. I guess it was sort of in the 50s or sort into the 60s. I mean, you have this this kind of individuation movement, and that was actually according to this documentary, that was actually threatening like mass industrial production, like assembly line. They were making cars. They were making, many cars, but they were all the same. And so then this production mode was in direct conflict with people wanting to be different and expressing themselves as unique individuals and like not having the same car as everybody else. And then, slowly that just became, I'm this kind of person. I'm the person with this kind of car. So like it became smaller and smaller slices, but everyone still ultimately was like wanting to be part of a tribe.
Mm. Well, and now, where you can get, there's such incredibly niche production where you can get everything, you can get personally made t-shirts for $20,
Right.
and there's so much of it. And I think it does feel like it's too much. People are atomized more. I think maybe craving more group experience or something. I mean, I know now in New York, like there's everything is the Knicks. I was really surprised how totally taken over New York was by the Knicks, because it's not really, my vibe of the city is not that it's super sports focused place,
Right.
but it's become one like recently. And I think it's probably big part of it is just people really craving that communal connection.
Yeah.
And
What
the
is
Knicks
it
are
like?
winning.
You guys,
You
yeah, I
know.
mean, plus the next one. But you guys are in New York. Like, what is it like? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. Like people talk about it spontaneously. They bring it up. I think, yeah, people just, when your home team is winning, people suddenly become fans, and when they're losing, they don't want to think about it too much. But yeah, I've been surprised too. I didn't think of New York as an especially sporty city, but you got the Barclays Center, you got Madison Square Garden, like they have all the arenas here. But yeah, I didn't expect I guess just the outpouring of support. And the day after the game, I was walking around the city and I see young people wearing Knicks jerseys and
Yeah.
people who were otherwise sort of very stylish and didn't kind of code as kind of ordinary sports fans,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I think
It's
there's,
the
there's
first
something nice
time,
about it, communal.
the first time in New York that I've been here where it had a kind of like college town on football game day vibe. I've never seen that in New York. And I remember when the Giants won the Super Bowl, I didn't quite feel it was the same, but like I'd never had that feeling of like, yeah, like the college team is playing in town and everybody in town is like into the game and stuff. I've never seen that here. So I think it was kind of like, yeah, it's nice, it's communal. I did watch the game outside, which was like really fun, in a big group. And like, but I yeah, I don't know. It was been a little bit jarring because it feels so different from how I'm used to seeing this place.
Hmm.
That's
Why is that
nice.
they didn't react the same way for football? I mean, is it because football is like, it's kind of problematic, it's déclassé, the
Well, they
concussion
play it outside of the
issue?
city too. It's not in the city,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
think
think
that,
it's,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's
But
part
yeah,
of it. I mean, the
a
Yankees
lot of
people get
people have,
excited,
yeah.
right? I mean, how would you
Yeah,
compare
the
it to like the
Yankees too.
Yankees
I
winning the
have
World
not been
Series?
I have not been here when either the Yankees or Mets have won the World
Well,
Series.
yeah,
I was here for the Giants winning. I guess that was like 2010, 2011, 2012, something like that. I don't remember. But like, yeah, I think it was like the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl is always a big deal. People go watch the Super Bowl and then people were happy that the Giants won. But this was like a week, it was
Mhm.
just a more time, I guess. And
yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
basketball, I mean, it's a city, it's an urban sport.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think the character of New York is much more of a basketball character than certainly football.
And
You
the
know,
timing of the year, maybe, February
mm,
versus June,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
summertime, the energy, the people want to be outside, they want to, day drink and, get with their
right,
friends
Yeah,
versus,
yeah.
February's not a fun month to be out and about.
right. Yeah. Okay, well, wait, back to this documentary. I mean, I just have so many thoughts about this, especially because so part three gets into, as you get into the late 60s and the baby boomers coming of age and the hippie movement, and then you get into like the human potential movement and people, the ethos of the day being, I'm going to discover myself. I don't want to work for the man. I am an individual, and people are paying a lot of money to do things like est, which is this,
Hmm.
actually quite abusive. I mean, talk about a racket. Like, people pay the money and go there, and then they get screamed at and get sort of abused. And the idea is that you're peeling back the layers of yourself like an onion, and you're supposed to get, to the bottom of it, and then you can be truly who you are. But then they would find that there was actually nothing there, and the idea would be then to create it. And then they talked about how, that idea of creating yourself from scratch, as we get into the 80s and the kind of the Reagan era and the rise of this sort of new kind of capitalism, you would just buy it. You would buy your identity rather than creating it. And so with that, then it became like, well, if I drive this kind of car, I'm this kind of person. If I, the sort of the advent of clothing brands as signifiers, like this designer jeans was not a thing until the 80s. So anyway, I found myself coming away from this just really wondering if the entire sort of like post 60s sexual revolution, neoliberal project, it has been a complete failure.
Hmm.
And we're going to go back. Like this has been, I don't know, what, 60 years? I mean, this has been a blink of an eye. That we've been living this way, that the birth control pill has been around, for instance. This is
Yeah.
just a nanosecond of time in the course of human civilization, and we've just been living nothing like human beings lived before that. And was this just kind of bound to fail? Rob, I feel like
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is your lane.
what's coming to mind? I remember reading this New Yorker article a couple of years ago, and it pointed out that I'd always wondered, like, when you think about a hippie, you think about free love and communes and smoking weed and renouncing worldly goods and kind of conventional ideas of success, and you think like, where did that, like, I've never met a hippie. Like, why do I know what hippies are like? Why do we all know what a hippie is, even though none of us have ever met one? And certainly none of us have ever met one in
Funny.
1969 at Woodstock. And it's all kind of pop culture. It's all movies. It's
Yeah, bell
music.
bottoms.
Yeah, it's film. It's all these cultural representations of that era. But in this article in the New Yorker, they pointed out that the average young person in the late 1960s, yeah, they, like, most of them weren't hippies. It points out public opinion data. Like, more than 60% of young people were in favor of the Vietnam War. The majority of young people didn't smoke marijuana. The majority of young people voted for Richard Nixon. Like, like, most people were normies. But this small segment of society, this highly influential segment that got amplified by cultural elites in the media, like, that became our, in the popular imagination, that was, the average boomer in 1969 was living the hippie life. It wasn't like that. It was a
Right.
small percentage of them. And similarly with like the 90s, who do we think of with like music in the 90s? We think of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love and the number one. Do you guys know who the number one or which musician sold the most number of copies of albums in the 1990s? The most popular musician of the 90s. You know who it is?
No.
Garth Brooks.
Oh,
Garth
yeah.
Brooks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Right.
Shania Twain sold 14 times as many albums as Courtney Love. But who do we remember as more representative of that era?
Right.
And so to your point about like, did it fail? Like, I don't know, did it ever really succeed?
Right.
You know, it was always a minority of people, and we all think of that era that way. But you know, the average person wasn't doing that, and you know, it never took hold. I think it's kind of too much at odds maybe with you know what normal people want.
Right.
That's interesting. I mean, and I think it's like, yeah, there are these really real media narratives. I mean, we were talking about this series and the Century of the Self, and how it was linked to Mad Men. And what was what was the thing that was kind of the interesting hook of Mad Men was it's the 60s, but it's not the San Francisco counterculture scene of 20 somethings in the late 60s. It's a movie about the 60s that's actually like New York, the older generation.
Yeah, it's about the 50s, really.
Yeah, but it's like, but that just because our depictions of the 60s were so like narrowly defined on this like very small, like it's the Haight-Ashbury, it's like one place, and it wasn't representative, and there were all kinds of things happening in the 60s that got washed under. The thing that I like, the thing that I think is really cool about Adam Curtis's documentary, and this is that it's looking at how people's psychology changes over time. And I feel like people's personality and psychological structure changes historically. At least it seemed to over the 20th century. I assume it did before then. And people have different senses of what leads to fulfillment, what the purpose of life is, what human nature is, what they desire, what feelings they're comfortable expressing and what they're not comfortable expressing. And I feel like all that stuff does really shift. And it's the most important angle on history, I think, but maybe because you have to infer so much to kind of try to guess as you go further back, like what people were like, it kind of gets ignored. But my sense is like, people really, I mean, at least recently, I mean, even generations, like one generation to the next, like they seem to have different types of personalities and like in a kind of a marked way. And I just think that's like really interesting to think about how that evolved.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seemed like, because I thought about Mad Men too. And in the pilot of Mad Men, do you guys remember this, where there was that like psychoanalyst talking to Don Draper about cigarette smoking and Freud's death drive, and Don didn't really take to it. But then later, you know, the famous sort of Lucky Strike speech about advertising is about happiness. It's about sort of telling people they're okay no matter what they're doing, you know, like sort of lifting this burden and selling them, you know, you buy this product, you're going to be okay. You know, like no matter what's going on in your life, you smoke your Lucky Strike, you buy this product or that, then like everything's fine. And sort of selling happiness in this way. And with advertising and it seemed like what was happening in the early and mid 20th century was the shift from, you know, living in, I don't know, like pre-industrial rural areas where the way that you're supposed to live was just sort of passed down through tradition and through sort of local social norms. And then with the rise of mass media, you know, you're learning how to live through advertising and mass media and corporations, and you know, your identity is you have options before you of what kind of identity you want to have by what you purchase. And you know, you guys have probably seen this discussion about like is culture stagnating? Why does Hollywood make so many remakes? You know, where you know the movies are just sort of based on pre-existing IP, whether a video game or some movie that had already existed, and they're just redoing it. But then when you walk through museums, like I can't imagine like anyone, you know, before the modern era saying like, we've been painting Jesus for 500 years. Maybe it's like, why is the culture stagnating? We're painting this guy over and over again. Like you look at it, like representations of art from centuries past before the modern era, and it was just like the same thing. It was just the same stories. It was all sort of inspired by religion and the Bible. And then in the 20th century, we want the novelty. We want the next thing. We're chasing sort of, like, why are we telling this, Spider-Man story again? Well, that's kind of what humans were like up until very recently, was like sort of interpretations and reinterpretations of the same story over and over. And so something about, I think, mass media made us sort of crave novelty and the new take. We want to be interesting. We want to be distinguished. Like we're seeking some form of a distinction through our purchases.
I mean, the same story. What did they say? There's only 12 stories or 8 stories. I mean, I guess it's a given. Whatever Joseph Campbell, however many stories he boiled it down.
Well, he says one story, right? But then I've seen others like, there's actually 12. There's 8 templates, archetypes.
Right. I mean, I guess the criticism is that you can tell the same story over and over again. It just doesn't have to have the exact same. Exact same characters and that are franchised characters, and we don't need another Lego movie. Like, why do we have Bob's whatever, SpongeBob SquarePants the musical? Is this really necessary? I don't know. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point, Rob. I don't know. I found myself after watching this series just feeling so. I just, the idea, when you elevate, sorry to use that word, the individual to this extent, and you encourage people to just like, hone themselves just down to the point where there's hardly anything left. Like there's the result of that is just going to be narcissism. I mean, the culture of narcissism, sorry, that's also a cliche, was born out of this, individuation movement. So I don't know where. So I do find it interesting that there is a kind of rebellion. People are wanting to get away from that and going to church. I don't know exactly what that means, but it does feel like you're sort of choking on your own regurgitations.
I'm reading this Christopher, so this is an allusion to Christopher Lasch, right? The Culture of Narcissism, his most famous book. But I'm reading a lesser-known book of his, Haven in a Heartless World, subtitled The Family Besieged. And, Lasch was, like, famously a left-wing critic of, the progressives of his day. And, there's a lot of sort of overlap with the culture of narcissism in this book, Haven in a Heartless World, where he talks about, selfishness and narcissism and preoccupation with the self and how this is creating undue stress on marriages, on relationships, on sort of this unwillingness to sacrifice for other people. We're so focused on ourselves. Like, why would we give anything up for our partner or for our children or for our parents or for anyone? It's all about me. And I think Lasch was, he was sort of in the midst of all of this, I guess like sort of the peak, right? This was sort of the early and mid 70s when he was writing in the aftermath of the sexual revolution.
I think I also, there might be something like another way of framing it. Like, I think we often like frame our history as like, we've had progress, we have this unbelievable quality of life, things are so much better than they've ever been, therefore we should all be more fulfilled. But there's like, with all the choices and all the complexity and a totally different environment from generations of ancestors, that's very challenging. And each generation faces new challenges that the past didn't and has to find its way. And even this thing about marriage, like, one of the hardest things about marriage, I think, is every couple has to relitigate what their roles are going to be. Like, if you're in a hunter-gatherer society, it's like, okay, you weave the baskets and I make the jam or whatever. It's like there's this way of having it, it works. You don't have to relitigate, hey, weaving baskets is harder than making jam. You should also have to, like,
I think the same person makes the jam as weaves the baskets.
Okay, fine. But then it's like,
somebody has to, shoot the jam.
Dig the hole.
Yeah.
I have to, so it's like, I think, it's like there's a sense of, and even to me, like, even if it wasn't perfectly equitable, there's a lot of benefit of just having it decided and we don't fight about it and this is just the way it is. If it's more or less works, that's fine. And maybe it's not perfect for everybody, but whatever. I think like there's all of these different things, challenges about picking a career, the constantly changing economic environment, the social dynamics that are changing, new products and new technologies. And it's like, it's good. I think there is something that makes things easy, but it also brings these challenges and I think stresses, and we're clearly like lost in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the absence of roles. There was an amusing study years ago where they asked separately, individuals within married couples, what percentage of household chores do you do? And the number always added up to more than 100% for each couple. So, if one person says 65% and the other says 53%, and that kind of thing, where it's always everyone always thinks they're doing more than maybe they truly are. And we have sort of these questions about gender roles and who's responsible for what, and like the constant compromising and negotiating and the back and forth. Which I think that probably works for like highly educated people who sort of enjoys these discussions anyway. But for a lot of people, that's sort of extra cognitive load. It's sort of nice to have these sort of hard and fast heuristics of, generally men do this or women do that, or, whatever, whoever is responsible for what, and have that conversation once.
It's so easy to like fight about all this stuff. And then you have all these options, like you can get divorced and date somebody else and try that, or like have an open marriage or and it's like people just like, it's kind of just dizzying. And I think really, yeah, I mean, I think there's so many dilemmas that are linked to prosperity. And I think about, for example, like kids who, I mean, this is maybe also cliche, but kids who grew up with a huge trust fund and lots of money, where the understanding is, well, their lives are super easy. They should all, they have everything. But it's like actually often an incredibly difficult life, because there's not a sense of what they're supposed to do. There's nothing they could really achieve that would impress everybody because they grew up with this privilege. They're kind of resented before they've even made a behavior because people envy them. And then like, often their parents are narcissistic or checked out. They live in a huge shadow of maybe a parent's success that they could never hit. And it's like all of these things are like hugely taxing psychological challenges, but we just read it as like, oh, they're privileged, they have everything, it should be easy. And it's often easier to have engaged middle class parents than disengaged, ultra wealthy, successful parents. Like so I think there's like a lot about how we think about our current prosperity it probably isn't. I mean, it doesn't seem to be making us happier. Like a lot of like the technology is so impressive and everything, but I don't get the sense that people are more fulfilled now than they were in the past.
Was that sort of one of the themes in Century of the Self of, now America is becoming more prosperous, people have money, and they're longing for some sense of meaning, so the advertisers step in and fulfill that role, as the country became less religious and more secular, and finding other ways of seeking satisfaction and self-actualization, and maybe if I buy this car I'll feel it, that kind of thing. I'm reminded of this interview with Matthew Weiner, the Mad Men creator, and he said that one of his inspirations for Mad Men was his own life, where he said, I was 35, I was doing well in my career, but I wasn't happy. And that was sort of one of the, initial sources of inspiration for the Don Draper character.
Oh, interesting.
You have everything and you're unhappy. And what is this? And, does the advertising cause that feeling of lack, or are they attempting to fill in something that existed before advertising?
Yeah, Matt Weiner's father was an ad man, was he not? I think. Yeah. I mean, he definitely talked about his parents being of that exact generation. If that makes sense. No, well, actually, no, that wouldn't. I don't know. Maybe his father was no. That makes sense. No, that makes sense because he would be older. Yeah. Anyway.
But
yeah.
My sense is like the most important question really is like, what does lead to fulfillment for people actually? Mm-hmm. And to the extent that it's possible, I think there probably is a lot of suffering just baked into being a person that you can't ever get rid of. and like you're going to have a lot of painful emotions no matter what. That's part of life. But like, what would lead to like more fulfillment? It just seems like a question that's like so central, but that we haven't really made good progress on. And I'm really worried that like, it seems like all of our society is geared towards like technological innovation and things like that, where we can have all this incredible technology and be miserable. And it just seems like, and I guess it is kind of the mental health field implicitly that's picking up the slack, because people have more prosperity. They realize that they're still not fulfilled, and it's one of the places people go. And I don't, there's problems with that being, with the mental health field being the place that people are going to go for those questions. It's one thing if you have like compulsions or a phobia or something like, and it's another thing if like there's a deeper kind of meaning, like, so I don't know that psychotherapy is always the best suited for that exploration.
No. Yeah. Well, I have a question. Go ahead if one of you was going to talk first. I have a tough question.
Okay.
Can you think of a time when you felt most fulfilled in your life? Either of you?
Most fulfilled. I can think of times when I felt unfulfilled, but I don't know
yes,
about
that's
like
at
most
the tip of the
fulfilled
tongue,
is-
right?
Yeah.
I can't either, which is mortifying. It would have to be during times when you're so focused on a particular project or something that you're doing, like you have a purpose outside of yourself, like being in service to someone. Would maybe qualify. So it's not necessarily, it's not even necessarily the happiest time. But you're not, you do feel like you have a reason that you're doing what you're doing.
There have been some studies. So like one thing that comes to mind, like when I finally finished my first book, I felt like it's always temporary though. These like, you dedicate yourself to a long-term project and you finally accomplish it, and then it kind of subsides. It's like slipping into a warm bath. Initially it feels really good, and then you habituate, and then it doesn't feel like anything at all, and you just are used to it. And I think that happens with achievements. You work really hard for something, and you have the momentary bliss, and then you got to move on to the next, the next task. But there are some studies on this about meaning versus happiness, and they tend to go together when you ask people about various activities and hobbies and so on. That meaning and happiness tend to be linked. That if an activity makes you happy, it tends to be meaningful, and vice versa. But then in some cases, they can be inversely correlated, where one goes up, the other goes down. One example was having children, where it does temporarily lead to a reduction in happiness, but a huge increase in a sense of meaning.
Right.
Things like, I remember one was training for a marathon. People were less happy, but then after the marathon, they felt more fulfilled, more sense of meaning. So yeah, I think like big tasks like that.
But that would fly in the face of what you just said. Okay, so they were unhappy when they were, but it's kind of like finishing the book. So they did the marathon, but then how long after that did they
the meaning, the feeling of, I mean, I would imagine not for very long.
Right.
But the meaning question to me, so I actually do have an answer to like when I felt more fulfilled. I think it is linked to the meaning question. I've never really understood people who are like, I can't keep zooming. I've never understood people who say, like, oh, I find my meaning by like playing guitar or something, or like drawing, or, I just like, it feels like, I think those are great things. I love guitar, I love drawing, but like, I don't get how that gives an ultimate sense of meaning. And the sincere, I've never thought about this question before, but like the times have, like, I'm a very spiritual person. I like have a very, very active like spirituality, and I think all of my most fulfilling experiences have been involved in that, and like have been connected to that there, and I do think there is something that comes from the heart and is like a deeply felt sense of like love and peace and connection that people can cultivate a connection to, that does some quality that does provide both meaning and fulfillment. And I don't know that I see it so often in like American congregational religious life, to be honest. Like, I don't think like going to church or going to synagogue or the types of places, I don't see it there that much. That seems to be something else that's maybe more social. And not that it can't be meaningful to people, but I don't see like, and I'm not saying that there's a lot of different types of stuff out there. So like, but I don't see a lot of like mystical senses of connection to a meaningful power so often. There definitely are places like that out there, but like it doesn't seem to me most of the congregational like religious life that I've actually seen practiced.
Hmm.
But it does, these are like questions that are kind of straddle the line between like psychology and spirituality. They strike me as like inherently spiritual questions. Um, and maybe that's why just approaching them purely psychologically feels inadequate to me. And I would never like, maybe I shouldn't do this, but I probably wouldn't ever bring this up in a session unless it was really requested by a patient. I'd feel like it was some type of boundary violation to talk intensely about spirituality when that's not something that the patient is explicitly seeking. I just wouldn't bring it up, which is maybe, I don't know.
I'm thinking about what you said earlier, Megan, about the kind of abandoning, like the sort of the hippie idea of the late 60s, the counterculture. But then wasn't it true by the 1980s, at least, again, like my impression from pop culture and mass media is the 80s were like, that was like the greed era, like almost a backlash to the late 60s of now it is about sort of being corporate, the Reagan era, working hard for the man, like suddenly that was okay again. And then in the 90s, there was like a reversal again with like grunge and Nirvana and like anti-consumerist sentiment. It seems like the culture goes through these, like right now, it seems like people are happy to sell out. Like, I guess we were almost like in a version of the 80s again, where I'm noticing young people, like, they're not really that preoccupied, I think, with questions of meaning.
Oh
and
yeah, I don't even
fulfillment.
think they have a concept of selling out. They're just monetizing. No, they're just
it feels very
building their
superficial,
brand.
materialistic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is sort of directionally true. I mean, it's more just what happened. The baby boomers, I mean, that's such a huge cohort. I mean, there are so many of them. So the baby boomers that you had, the portion of them that were the hippies in the late 60s into the 70s, they grew up, they got married, they had families, they settled into corporate life, and they were the beneficiaries of a, huge influx of wealth. So they became the yuppies, right? So the hippies became the yuppies, and the 80s was marked by this particular kind of aesthetic around yuppies. I mean, if you see a movie like St. Elmo's Fire, that I think that captured, those were sort of younger boomers, but it captured this kind of like conservative sort of, that was about a bunch of people that graduated from Georgetown. So they had, some of them were kind of like wacky. Demi Moore's in the movie. She's kind of like a, cokehead, kind of wacky, but they're pretty preppy. There is a kind of button down conservative fashion aesthetic. But no, I think it's more just that they got money. The boomers, they became, the masters of the universe. They were working on Wall Street, and they were, at least the ones that we saw in pop culture. And then in the 90s, it just turned into tech billionaires. I mean, I don't know.
Are these, but Rob, weren't you kind of like suggesting earlier that maybe these narratives aren't accurate? They're kind of like these kind of,
that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about them. They're funded. They're relevant to talk about.
I'm thinking if we were going to do that for like the last 15 or 20 years, it'd be like, well, then Obama was elected and everybody liked that, and then they didn't, and so then they voted for Trump, and then everybody went woke, and then everybody decided they didn't like
Yeah,
woke.
so
And
it's different
like,
groups
not
of
really.
people.
Like I
Right.
think there've been like a tug of war between maybe cultural factions that have always been there, and sometimes one gets a little bit more prominent. I don't know that the views now, because it's like we had the woke period, and then there's like the backlash against woke now, and I don't know, like maybe like there was like a 5 or 10 point swing in popularity of those ideas from one to the other, and we kind of are framing it as if woke's gone now, and it's definitely not.
It's
And
not.
uh,
It feels almost worse in a way. Have you noticed this?
Say more about that. Why do you think it's worse?
I
haven't
can't
heard
quite put
that.
my finger on it. I can't. I feel like the people who are holding on to it have a death grip on it, and they're really not letting go. Like there's an intensity. There's fewer people doing it, but they are, making up for everybody else. Like it's really strong. I don't know.
Okay, so it's absolute numbers have shrank, but the ones who are still true believers are working
Maybe.
extra hard to.
I mean, it's funny because I was this is maybe germane, but I was we talked about homelessness in a recent episode and talked about the Spencer Pratt campaign in the LA mayor's race here, and my support of him, and it was a very qualified support. It was very MAGA coded to a lot of people. So a lot of people who hadn't been listening to anything he was saying, just assumed he was like a little mini Trump. And I noticed that the vitriol that I got from people, and the utter disdain and the writing off and like truly I'm not going to be friends with you anymore stuff was really worse than anything I'd ever seen in 20 plus years of making people mad with my opinions. So I think that there's just this sort of smaller coalition. I don't know. It's just interesting.
no, I think for sure. I mean, I heard, for example, I haven't verified this, but I did hear the APA is considering adding a social justice requirement to their ethics code, where like all psychologists have to pursue that's in 2026, 2027. They're going to add that. There's definitely all those academic quarters are the same. I think I think there's a lot of the same stuff that, and like they haven't, they're going to come back. Like, and I think when they come back, they're going to be stronger than ever. And
The wokesters, you mean?
yes.
Really? Well, I mean, the right has gotten so much worse. That's the thing. The whole problem with the woke stuff is that I said you're handing it to your enemy. So the pendulum is going to swing so far to the other side, and that's what it is now. So they're justified in their minds. Like, well, look at all these white nationalists running around, and look at this, and we have to react in this extreme way. So, but you think they're going to come back worse, and what is that going to look like?
I think that they still control all of the institutions they used to control. The infrastructure to have a response hasn't really emerged. But like, so like like if you're an actor or a writer, there's not like new institutions and new infrastructures to help support you. If you were if like it came back tomorrow, there wouldn't be that institutional ability to push back, and they still control everything. I think I don't know. I think that the people who were opposed to those turns in the social justice or anti-racist movement really put so much of their energy into electoral politics, and I just don't know that they reformed existing institutions that much. Universities, I think, have gotten more radical.
Yeah.
And it's not just universities, but like mental health institutions and all of that. I don't think any of them have really changed. And I think like once the demographics are pushing towards like that style of person becoming not just like viable nationally, but likely to win nationally. And then if there isn't that electoral counterpoint, I don't see what would get them to pull back from what they're doing.
I've heard this, friends of mine who work in academia, that it's as bad as ever. Part of the reason why it seems from the outside like maybe things have cooled off in the universities is, one reason is because they've already canceled everyone who was problematic. There was massive purge for
Right.
maybe a 2.5. Well, it depends on the time span, but anywhere from 2 to 10 years, where anyone who stepped out of line was jettisoned, forced to resign, or their offer letters were revoked or whatever it was. And then everyone else, of course, got the message to not say those things. They saw the examples and they keep their heads down. And so, all the problematic people are gone, and everyone else got the message of what to do. And then people self-select out too, which is, me and a lot of other
Yeah, look at
PhD
you and
students.
all three of us, presumably we could be working at universities if the climate was different, right? I would be.
Yeah, universities, or like a sort of a standard kind of legacy media purge or something.
Right.
But it's just it's harder now than it was a decade or more ago. And people self-select out, where I'm like, there was no way I was going to get a professor job. Like, even if I was given an offer, I think 2022 when I finished, like, that was still kind of peak woke. And even if an offer was extended to me, I wouldn't have taken it. And I know, a lot of my friends sort of took the same sort of path, exited out of this. And I agree with you. It's going to come back, and it might be worse.
Well, it's good for podcasters, I guess.
I don't think people are prepared, actually. I think the types of psychological challenges people are going to face, because I think I really was on the leading edge of people encountering this. And I remember, for example, this might have been 2011, 2012. I had a workplace training on microaggressions. And for people who haven't seen this, it's like, if you're white and you're accused of a microaggression from someone who's not white, it doesn't matter what you did, what your intention was, what happened, nothing matters. You're always wrong and have to apologize no matter what. And that's what I was trained at my job. And the idea that that's what they want to have be the standard of training, that's the legal and the law of the land throughout the country, and they're still pushing for it when they get who they want in power. I think it's very, and I don't think people are prepared for how are we going to respond to this? There's a lot of people who respond obviously with becoming white nationalists, and people who become very masochistic and kind of dive into it. And, it's I think that all of that is going to come back, because it's such a, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency among a certain group to think, oh, now that we can say retarded, everything's okay now. It's over. There's weird little examples that people cling on to, and I think those are canards,
Yeah, and people don't. When I talk to people about this, it doesn't seem to compute. Where in 2020, people were digging up social media posts from 2009, left-wing celebrities who in 2009, they could use gay as a pejorative in a tweet. And it was, at that time it was funny. 11 years later, it was a cancelable offense. And now we're, back, I guess. Oh, we passed peak woke. We can say retard again. How do you know that in 2032, when the wokes come back, they dig up a tweet from 2026 where you used retard as an ableist slur, and now you're going to lose your TV writing job, or your columnist gig, or
your
whatever,
AI prompting job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not going to be allowed to use Claude anymore. So
Claude is going to cancel you. They're probably it's going to just go back and dig up
retroactively.
Everything. Yeah.
In a way, this does kind of relate to the century of the self, in that I do feel the dilemmas and challenges and stuff that it's nobody, I don't have any, my parents didn't have to deal with this. My grandparents didn't have to deal with this. It's it's a whole new constellation.
You mean the rapidly changing norms around language and
and
acceptability.
Things at work where you're I definitely had to do those privilege walks, and I did everything, every single one of those things I've had to do, and it was okay, I can say something about this and put like my degree that I've put all this time and money in on the line, or I can just kind of like eat it and try to get through. And, I chose the latter for the most part.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
that's just like the idea that like that's something that like I remember like this is like a good example of a study that we really want to do, and I'm hoping happens soon. It's like um, a study of like anti-white racial bullying. It really tends to happen at schools where white people are a minority at the school, and they often face explicitly racially aggressive bullying that's targeted towards white people, and the parents are clueless and like I think often like like, oh, a white person could get racially bullied. They can't conceive of what that is. There's no resources for them, there's no literature on it, there's not data about prevalence. And so people who have that experience are kind of like, it's weirdly like forbidden for them to even seek help for what they've been through, because talking about that issue gets you branded a white supremacist. So like they can't even talk about what's happened to them without facing a backlash. And the likelihood that people in their social circle will say, well, yeah, but you have had privilege and you've got to understand that their anger is coming from a system, or that type of response is very likely, where even their friends and family are going to like side with the others. So it's like I think like there's no psychological literature about it. It's effectively zero. And so I think like there's so many different types of dilemmas like that people are facing and just trying to figure out on their own. And it's just really different from past eras. I wish, I could have some of the struggles and dilemmas of like people were having in the 80s about figuring out their identity or something.
Oh,
It's a lot more fun.
it's just sort of like, am I a Jordache type or a Sassoon type? Or
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm reminded, Andrew, what you're saying of this quote. I'm going to butcher it, from Thomas Sowell, and he is describing how you have one group, because their ancestors historically suffered. Today, actual flesh and blood human beings cannot be held responsible for anything they do, and then you have this other group whose ancestors committed atrocities, but they, flesh and blood human beings, have done nothing wrong, but they have to be held responsible.
Yeah.
So you have one group who does bad things, but they can't be held responsible, and one who hasn't done anything, but they must be held responsible for something they haven't done. And it's this strange kind of contradiction there. And that's probably it's like warping our politics in weird ways. And on the right, you see a lot of like overt outward racism on X, and it's gotten kind of ugly in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is inevitable, which is totally inevitable, because I think like if we can't respond to these challenges in a mature way, it ensures they're going to be acted out in a destructive way. Like I just like inevitably, and nobody wants to talk about these issues because they're so charged. Similar stuff with gender, masculinity, whatever. All these kind of third rail issues are the issues that are the most important to talk about.
Right.
Because if we don't, they really are going to like create chaos. It's already happening.
I never know why people don't want to talk about them, because they are the most interesting issues. Like I keep saying, like, it's the best show in town. Why? I don't understand all these, like, quote unquote public intellectuals, or, journalists and writers and academics and people who ostensibly got into this business because they liked talking about ideas, and suddenly they don't want to talk about the best ones. It's so weird to me.
The social cost is still really high.
I get it. Yeah, no, I know. But like, how boring.
I know. And I also just can't do that. I'm bad at self-censoring. I think like that's like I just am not good at hiding what I think.
That's a good trait.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. No poker face. Yeah.
None.
Well, you must have gotten through the privilege walk somehow. Did you?
Oh, that's true. I did fake it through. I don't think they fully bought my, I didn't have to like, I think if I actually had to like kneel and do all of that stuff, I think I would have had a hard time. But I could just kind of like take my steps and then sit there and not talk. It was so like demoralizing. but it was also like, I think I kind of thought about it as like an experiment. I'm interested in like conformity and obedience and
Yeah.
what everybody's going to do if they're asked to, um, and just like how like self-righteous the most hateful people are.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We were gonna do at the Unspeakeasy retreats. Still trying to figure this out. Do a privilege walk, but for if you're canceled. So it's like take a step forward, you know, if you've been dragged on Twitter, or take 2 steps forward if you've lost your job or something, and then
Lost a friend,
it's
lost a
reverse
job,
privilege. Yes, it's
lost
can't.
a girlfriend, a romantic partner.
Wait,
Yeah.
so this is a progress, or what is this?
Oh,
Privilege
you don't know
walk
what
is
the
you take a
privilege
step
walk
forward.
is? This is
I've
the thing.
never.
Oh my God, Rob,
Okay.
you missed.
I just assumed this was like a 5K for, I don't know, they made white
No,
guys
it's
run
the
a
hokey
5K or
pokey.
something.
It's the hokey pokey for it's the wokey pokey. So it's
Beautiful.
literally a game. It's a thing. It's like an icebreaker exercise, and they do it a lot on like sort of corporate retreats, or it's just group activities. Yeah. So it's like if you take a step forward, if you both of your parents were married, or if you're if you went to a 4-year college or whatever. So it's just, and then at the end of it, somehow like everybody is. If you've got a group of 20 people and you can see who's in the front and who's in the back, and so everybody knows who everybody is. So
But they
all
never
done.
do a version of this where like take a step forward if you're in this elite PhD program, but you scored a 150 on the
yeah,
GRE.
Yeah, right. If you were a
yeah.
diversity hire. Yeah, I don't know.
I know we need to wrap up, but I do want to say something about it. I think like for me, like it, without a doubt, being in New York, the place where I feel this the most is with dating. And I do like, just this past week, I had a date scheduled to somebody and she Googled me and then canceled it basically.
Okay.
It happened to me, and she's like, I saw your profile online and I just can't do this. And I know I know other things have not worked out, and I end up kind of like dreading when this is going to come out, or what they're going to think about, or do I need
What
to
are
just
they going to see? What are they seeing that's so problematic?
I don't know, and unfortunately it's not a
This
conversation
show,
I've
this
opened up.
podcast, I see who you
Yeah,
do this podcast with, and it's not you, Andrew. It's your co-hosts, Rob and Megan, and I can't be.
I mean, you guys
associated
are
with
really
you.
hurting me. You guys,
I know
hope-
this is,
Yeah.
but this is why
Burning
I
a lot of
keep
reputational capital here.
Exactly. This is guilt by adjacency. This is why we need an anti-woke dating app. I've been saying this for a million years.
There is no social infrastructure for people that are even heterodox, and that includes a lot of liberals. Open Therapy Institute, we did a member survey, and 60% of our therapists identify as liberal. So we're not even like, we're a fairly balanced organization.
Yeah, that's pretty
There's
impressive.
no social infrastructure. So like, where do you meet people? Where do you hang out? Where do you date? What do you do? How do you advance your career? How do you move forward? It's so neglected that like New York, what percentage of New York or LA are heterodox? It's probably
Well,
like,
you have more in New York than we have out here. There's a whole world of heterodox people hanging out in New York.
but it's probably a quarter to a third of the city, I think. It's like maybe it's less.
Oh,
but
that are deep down hetero. They just don't know the. You mean what do you mean? Like they don't know the
that are
word.
heterodox. Their beliefs are broadly.
Oh yeah, like
heterodox.
normies.
Yeah, it's like, and yet if they're a quarter of the city and they have no social infrastructure, no places to meet, no places to network professionally, no places to date, it's unbelievable what a crisis this is. And I don't see any institutions or any place stepping in to fill that. And they're like, I do understand that like Reason has talks, and like there are places like
The
Manhattan.
Free Press, they have their dinner
Free
club
Press.
now.
They'll have stuff, but it's like there needs to be regular, recurring social spaces where people can establish friendships with new people. They have to be like, it has to be like you're playing pool, or you're playing cornhole, or whatever it is. It has to be something where you have a regular, recurring activity where you see people and can make new connections. It has to be related to professional stuff and hobbies and interests, and not just talks. And you actually have to have workspaces. And like, it's like, if that stuff doesn't get built, when the woke stuff comes back, it's hopeless, because you can't be you can't speak up against that stuff without any social network or social infrastructure. You just
So
can't.
it's a religion. I mean, really, what you need to build is like a massive church.
It could, I mean, it's anything. I mean, churches are good at that. Like,
No, I know. I mean, look, I think about this all the time. I'm not joking. I mean, this is
yeah,
kind of what I've been trying to do. Like, I wanted to have an unspeakeasy, like, in every community. And I was like, yeah, what is that thing where it's like you go there and you don't have to pay, and there's like people, and you go there, like, what? It's like, oh yeah, a church.
but
So,
it's like
you know,
it is. I guess it's adjacent to it, maybe, but it has this like it has like a values, you know,
yeah, no, like a
that's not
large religion, like if
explicitly
like
religious.
I mean, a lot of, you know, evangelical religion, you know, people, big evangelical churches, people do business networking through that. I mean, it's a massive, massive, you
Yeah,
know,
you have to be able
networking
to like
system,
build your law practice,
right?
build your,
I mean,
acupuncture
or like
practice,
the
whatever you're
Latter-day
doing.
Saints. There needs to be, I
Yes.
mean, that's a giant
Professional network.
infrastructure.
And a lot of this is like the type of people who like would listen to this show and other types of like have to like there's such a desperate need to create this across the country. And I think also that donors have to support it and there has to be ways to make it economical. Like it's like all this it feels like a major blind spot. I'm so like I don't know. We've talked about this before, but it's just like it doesn't. I don't think ideas matter, really. I think spaces matter and social networks matter, and I think ideas are secondary. You can be right about everything, and if you don't have social networks, you will lose every time. I just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry for getting
if anyone's listening, donate money so we can
Well,
build an amusement park
I think
for the
let me say
heterodox
one other
people.
thing. It should be like it should be an amusement park because it should be my sense of like the ratio of politics to non-politics should be like 80-20, like 20% politics,
Yeah.
80% non-politics. It should be light touch, maybe even 10%.
No, I agree.
Mostly non-politics with a little bit of heterodoxy. That's the perfect ratio. So it should be like, yeah, it should be like a comedy club, a like magic club.
Yeah, it needs to be like the Truman Show. It just needs to be its own community with like its own movie theater. It needs to be a town. You know what? It needs to be a city. It needs to
Okay.
be a city just for with like largely heterodox. I mean,
A
maybe that exists and it's in
Yeah,
Florida.
like a
Florida, Austin. I don't know.
Maybe
like
not
an
Austin. Oh, well, maybe.
independent movie theater that had heterodox stuff at it and also just regular good movies. That'd be awesome. Like anything, like but it's not. It needs all of the things.
I know. Call
Okay.
Elon Musk. He can turn Mars into this place. Mars
Yeah.
is going to be where all the heterodox people colonize.
I heard he doesn't give to anything.
Well, we tell him to make Mars for us. He's giving to that project.
Heterodox
Yeah, that's
Mars.
true.
Yeah.
Heterodox Mars. That's
Yeah.
true. I mean, then the woke people will have their dream. They'll ship
Fine.
us off
You
to
know what?
Mars.
Let him. That's fine.
Fine. Okay.
Anyway,
I mean,
all
I
right.
walked past a theater a couple of days ago, and above the theater there was a sign. It said, "Our mayor Muslim, our bagels Jewish, our films indie." So maybe that's
Oh,
we
not
can
Indian.
start there.
Not
No,
politics.
not Indian, but indie. I think because
All
it was an
right.
indie theater.
Our median years that we've lived in New York City, 3. I mean, these are not the classic
Not the
New
real
Yorkers.
New Yorkers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great conversation. Thank you
All right.
both, and see you next time.
All right, thanks, man.
Right.